Hello, I'm Dr. Andrea Dawson. I'm the violin and viola professor at MTSU. Today I would like to help you prepare for your mid-state violin 7th and 8th grade audition. We will be looking at practice strategies for the excerpt from Kuchler's Concertino in D major. Remember, success is all about practicing correctly. Let's look at some ways to get you on track to play your best audition. The first thing that we want to make sure is that we are tuning your violin very carefully. So a lot of you I know tune to the tuner and then you look at the needle, but actually we will want to develop our ears. So we will use the A drone and check. That our A matches very beautifully, and then we're listening for the strings to mesh very beautifully for that perfect fifth. The other thing that we want to think about when we're first looking at intonation is making sure that we understand the key that we're in. So we play a scale in D major. You have your 2-octave D major scale. But we also want to really think about all the finger patterns in the positions that we're going to use. And as you'll see in a minute, we're going to use first position, second position, and third position in this video. And so I want us to look at the finger patterns on each of the strings. So here they are. You'll see first position, we have a finger pattern on each of the strings, first on the G string, then on the D string, the A string, and the E string. And we can play those. With a good, clear half step between 3 and 4 on the D string. A clear half step between 2 and 3. And the same pattern on the A string. And then the half step between 1 and 2 on the E string. And that hopefully is pretty familiar to you by now. But when we go to second position, we have to adjust all of those finger patterns, and it's a good idea to practice that. So we're going to practice, even though we're not necessarily going to use all of the strings in second position, let's look at it anyway. On the G string, we have half step between 2 and 3, and if second position is less familiar for you, let's find the third finger first. And if we know our third finger's right, then we can put a half step behind it for the second finger, and we play the finger pattern. 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, half step. Going to the D string, 1, 2, half step. A string again, same pattern. With a 1, 2 half step, and then crossing over to the E string, we lower the 1 for a G natural, and we play all half steps. All right, we are going to also play in third position. Let's look at that finger pattern again, finding your second finger D, making sure that's in tune. We play a half step 1, 2 on the G string. Reach back with the first finger for the G natural, and all whole steps on the D string. Fourth finger comes back for a half step between 3 and 4 on the A string. And then E string, same pattern. Half step between C sharp or 3 and 4. So knowing exactly where your half and whole steps is a very important step to make sure you're playing in tune. You may be able to tell somewhat by ear, but if you're in a passage that the notes seem a little unpredictable to you, you might be tempted to play it by ear and get it wrong. So let's not do that. Really know where your half steps are. Next, let's look at the ringing tones, because we want to know where the half steps are, but the ringing tones are going to help us play really in tune. And so if you don't know this, ringing tones are the notes that are the same as our open strings. They can be an octave lower, an octave higher, 2 octaves higher, or the same octave. And so I'm not counting ringing tones as open strings because those are obvious, but all the notes that are fingered and have the same name as an open string. And so as you see here, the highlighted green notes are going to be our ringing tones. I'm just going to show you a few of those and how that works. When that's in tune, I let go of the note. With the bow, I keep my finger down and I can hear it ringing after. And the A as well. And the E is a little more difficult, but it works. There's that D again, and the E, fourth finger. And so especially those fourth fingers, which we have to work on to get in tune. So you can see where all the green highlighted notes are good ringing tones to practice as you're going through this slowly. Look also at the next screen. We are going to talk about when to use open strings and when to use fourth fingers. In this excerpt, it's okay to use some open strings, but we want to do it in a logical way. So don't just use them because you think you don't want to use your fourth finger. The fourth finger is better in some places, and the open string is better in other places. And some places you can choose. At the very opening of the excerpt, I would use open A. And I would prefer 4 here. You could probably get away with an open A there, but I think 4 sounds better if you can get it in tune. In the second measure, definitely use the fourth finger. On the second beat, an open A on the last note so that we can cross the string. In measure 4, the first E we can use open if we want to, but definitely don't cross the string again for the last E. I would use fourth finger for sure on the fourth beat, and you can try it both ways for the E that's right before that. And you can see in measure 5, fourth finger, basically we don't want to cross the string to play an open E, but we can play it at the end of the bar where we're going to stay on the E string. And you can look at the rest of this and see that on the end we're using measure 8, open E's in beats 2 and 3, but fourth finger in the fourth beat. Measure 9, open A on the second beat, but fourth finger on the third beat, so we don't have to do a weird string crossing there. Okay, so those are your open versus fourth fingers. The other fingering that I want you to look at is the very end of the piece, or the end of the excerpt. We can do this, right? We can do a third finger and then cross the string, but I would maybe suggest using a fourth finger if you want to. You can try it both ways. Some of us have trouble getting our third finger back and forth. We have to go from a C sharp to a D natural. And that might feel like a big jump, so you can experiment with using your fourth finger for the C sharp. So I want to show you a fingering that I recommend for measures 11 through 13. You might be tempted to say, well, I've only practiced first and third position, and we can do that, but I think the shifting, if we do that in that measure 12, actually makes it a little more difficult. So maybe if you have time, practice that next measure in second position. So this is the fingering I recommend. Measure 11 in first position. Notice where the half steps are. We practice those finger patterns. And then the pickup to measure 12, we will shift to second position and then back down again using the half step between the G and the F sharp in measure 12, as it says on the screen. Then in the pickup to measure 13, you'll shift in that rest to the third position, so that each measure, 1-4, 1-4, and 1-4 again. And you can shift back to first position then on the C sharp if you like. So the fingerings that we're looking at now, we are going to look at some shifting exercises to help us play this, and then we'll put it all together. So on this screen, you can see the shifting exercise to get us from first position, the C sharp, to the C sharp in second position. So we're trying to go to replace 2 with 1. And so we're going to practice that slowly using what I call a guide finger. And notice that when we shift, we want to make sure that the arm is what is moving and not the fingers or the hand or the wrist or the thumb. The thumb doesn't stay behind, right? It doesn't do anything weird like that. Everything's going to move together. And for this little tiny shift, there's not much to do. You see, I'm moving like maybe half an inch, if that. Not even. And then I play a half step. And I'm going to practice that until it feels good. And one of the things we're adjusting is we're only shifting up a half step, but the first finger has to move more. So 2 is moving up a half step and 1 is coming to meet it. So when I do the next exercise on the second measure, I'm doing the same thing. So in that rest, I'm putting my second finger down and then putting my first finger right behind it and then lifting the second finger and seeing if I made it, which I did that time. So I'm going to practice that again, shifting up, first finger behind, until I get the hang of it and I can practice it quicker. And then I put the A in between. And then I can have fun with it just doing that if I get really good at it. Okay, let's look at the next shift. Again, remember, now we're shifting from first to third, and we're still going to remember to shift from the arm, thumb, hand, wrist. Everything moves together. It's the elbow is closing and the arm is moving and everything else is along for the ride. So we're going to, for this particular shifting practice, we're going to listen to the notes we're aiming for first. So I'm going to tune them to the D string. I know that it doesn't say that on the screen, but that's a good idea to get those notes really nicely in our ear. Both notes should sound good with the D string. And then I'm going to play it as a shift. And if I missed that, then I might want to tune them again with the D string so I've got it in my ear. I can go slowly so that I stop. When I get there, go as many times as slowly at first as you want to. You can test it when you're there and test it on the way down. And then when we feel good about that, we've practiced that a lot. I don't feel good about that. And then I add the fourth finger. And I try to play the double stop to see if that can match a beautiful octave. So that's the other shift going up. Oh, we got to third position. Now we have to get that down again. We did practice this shift already, but we're going to practice going down only. This is the shift in measure 13. I'm shifting down with the first finger, and then I will just slur it together. And my arm is shifting all the way from third position to first position, so I feel like that's a significant motion with the arm, but the notes are really close together. So I'm going to really think about the first finger being in that really in tune D and the second finger moving into the slot right behind it. But I'm doing it all in a very smooth and relaxed way. So once I practice those 3 shifts, those are the 3 shifts in this passage, then I can put it back together. And for good measure, let's put our metronome on. I'm going to start it at half tempo and then do it. See what it sounds like at full tempo. 3 and 4. Shift. Shift. Etc. Okay? So that's half tempo. That's still pretty fast. If you were like, ooh, that still sounds hard, you know what? Practice it even slower. How about quarter tempo? Right, and so now the click is on the 16th note, so you have to hold those 8th notes for 2 clicks. Well, here's all the way up to tempo. Don't do this until you're ready. concept of tone, because we can play all the right notes and all the right rhythms, and hopefully we will, and all the right intonation. But we also want to play with a beautiful tone. And so beautiful tone requires some thinking about things that maybe you're not thinking about every day, but you should. The first thing is parallel and perpendicular. Those are good words, 2 P's. Parallel. The strings should be parallel to the ground at all times. If you could put a marble on the G and the D string and it rolls off, then you are not parallel to the ground. If the marble could stay on the 2 strings, then your strings are parallel to the ground. Perpendicular comes in with the perpendicularity between, I have to do this without looking in the camera because it's backwards. Yep, there we go. Between the angle between the strings and the bow. And even a little bit of not perpendicular is going to make my sound not as good. So I really recommend looking in a mirror and finding this perpendicularity. In addition to that, we want to talk about contact point, which is where is my bow on the string, right? What we don't want to do is play on the fingerboard because it kind of sounds like that, or really even on the bridge. Neither of those sound good. So we're looking for a contact point that's kind of right between the bridge and the fingerboard, maybe a slightly closer to the bridge for a good tone, right? The other part of this is we want to make sure all of our hair is touching the string, but maybe the stick is slightly on this side, right? And I said slightly, and I went like this. You want to make sure your hair is ahead of the stick. But if this is 90-degree angle, if the bow is 90 degrees to the string this way, then maybe we just lean a little bit over with the stick. Not too much, or it will affect the sound. And then the other element, of course, is how much bow we use. If I use not enough bow, it sounds like that. If I use too much bow, it sounds like that. So we need to use just in the middle. And the last one that I didn't mention yet is the weight of the bow. So we're going to apply a little bit of weight. Some people like to say pressure. I like to say weight because I want to feel like my arm is relaxed into the string and my index finger is leaning the stick a little bit towards the hair. If I do too much, then I'd scratch, If I do too little, it doesn't sound good at all. So everything is in the middle. Middle of the bow, middle of the string playing field, right? Medium weight, good amount of hair, medium bow speed, sorry. Then I get the sound that I want. And for the 16th note, and that brings me to the showing you what the first few measures with the metronome sound like on open A. Ooh, I need to count myself off, don't I? 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay, I think that's a really good thing to practice because we want to figure out what it sounds like, and if I'm thinking about my left hand, I'm not as good at doing that. Now, we can also do that at half tempo to prepare. 3 and 4. Make sure when you do that your quarter notes get 2 clicks, that the 8th notes get 1, and then the 16ths obviously are 2 per click. And if we look at this next example, I'm going to leave this metronome on. We see measure 8. Wait, is that measure 8? Yes, it is measure 8. Has a bunch of string crossings. No matter what fingering we choose, which open strings we pick and which ones we don't, we do have to play open strings here. We do have to play string crossings here. And so I am just going to show you the pattern that uses the open strings that I selected, which is on beats 2 and 3, and then 4th finger on the 4th beat. And this is what results, and this is worth practicing the open string pattern. So it looks like this. All right, so that's at half tempo with the click on the 8th note. We'll try that a few times. And then when I feel good about that, I'm going to do it up to tempo. 3, 4. And again, ready, go. All right, so I would practice that because we think the only thing that's difficult is in the left hand, but that's actually not true. We want to pay a lot of attention to what our bow is doing. All righty. Now, this gets us to the topic of how do I practice fast passage work so that I can get up to the tempo that I want to get up to. Because actually this tempo of 96 is pretty fast, and it might be that you won't be able to confidently play it at 96. And I think that you should audition at the fastest tempo that you can play really well, right? So work on getting the tempo close to what it says, but if you can't get it to the maximum tempo, then play it at a tempo that is going to be very successful. But let's look at some ways to help us get faster. So I'm going to go and we're going to talk about measures 8 and 9 as an example of how to get something fast. I think this is one of the trickier passages. And so the first thing we're going to work on is what I call 4, 3, 2, 1, and we need to use the metronome for this. So I'm going to put the metronome on 96, which is my goal tempo, and I'm going to play 4/16 for every note. So it'll be one beat of each note. It will look like this. Stop there. And this brings me to a point that I would like to make, which is when you're practicing a passage, don't practice all of it at once. In fact, you could practice just 2 beats at a time. For me, I'm practicing 6 beats, but not the whole passage every time. It wastes time and we're not focused as well. The next thing, after I feel like, oh, I can play 4 notes at that tempo really easily because the notes are going at quarter tempo while the bow is going at full tempo. To do 3, I have to do a little math, which is I have to divide by 3 and multiply by 4, but I've done that for you. And we're going to go to 128 for our next tempo. So change your metronome to 128. And now we're going to play 3 of every note. If you want to kind of get yourself set on that. Now, just so you know, the bow is moving at the same speed, but the notes will go a little faster. Triplets are really good to practice. I would recommend this because it will help your coordination between your left and your right hands a lot. So here's measure 8 with triplets. Again, ready, and. Good. And I didn't mention this before, but always put your bow on the string before you start any of this. Then the next thing is we're going to go back, because I said it was 4, 3, 2, 1, and we've only done 4 and 3. So to do 2, we're going to go back to 96. And in this case, the bow is moving at the same speed. We're going to do 2 of every note, and it's going to be 4 notes per beat again. And I'm listening to make sure that my left hand is changing exactly cleanly with the bow, which that time I don't think I was perfect. Let's try that again. Okay, right? So far that doesn't seem very hard. That's like half tempo. That's pretty manageable maybe. Before we go to full tempo, I want to make our lives a little bit difficult. And if this one freaks you out, you don't have to try it, but maybe give it a try once and see. I want to do 2 again, but we're going to do it starting up bow. So let's see how that feels. And ready, go. The reason I think that's useful is that it helps us make our up and down bows more even. All right, so if I've done that a bunch of times, I'm going to see now if I can play the passage up to tempo. What if I can't? Well, I'm just going to try it. If today it doesn't go well, then I try the same exercises tomorrow and see if I'm a little better the next day. But I'm going to try it. And that time I would say it was a little behind the metronome, so I'm going to give it another shot. I think I did better that time. All right. That's one of my favorite ways to practice passage work, because I think it's kind of straightforward. If you've got a metronome and you can do the math, or you just take my math for granted, that will be good. 96 and 128. If you're going to do it a little bit slower, 90 and 120 would be another combination that works. Otherwise, I'd have to do more math for you, but it's your original tempo, and then the triplet tempo is going to be multiply by 4 and divide by 3. So you can use a calculator. Dotted rhythms are another popular way. If we do the dotted rhythms, we have to do them in both directions. So we're going to do long, short. And we're going to do short, long, which everybody gets more confused about. Okay, so that's a good one to do as well. We're just working on building collaboration between our left and right hands. And then another fun one to do, what happens is a lot of time we practice slowly because we know we want to play really cleanly, and that's an excellent thing to do, but we get to this point where slow isn't getting to fast. So we have to figure out what fast practicing is. So this is all to say, practice slowly for sure with the metronome, quarter tempo, half tempo, whatever it takes, but nice and even tempo. Listen for ringing tones, all that. But then once you've done that and you're trying to speed it up, these tricks will help. The dotted rhythms, the 4, 3, 2, 1. And another one is clumping. It's not a very attractive word, but it works. And we're going to play each beat up to tempo, overlapping with the first note of the next beat. And we can repeat each one as many times as we want. In this case, I'm going to do each one twice to show you what it sounds like. Here's measure 8 and 9 again. Next beat. Always from the string, ready, go. Again, and next one, etc. Right? And then if I'm like, oh, look at me, I'm playing it up to tempo, just one beat at a time. Then I try 2 beats at a time. And then maybe starting on the second beat. Starting on the third beat. Etc., etc. And then maybe I'm ready to play the whole measure. All right, I know, easy for me to say, but I think these are some good ways to practice. It's hard to go in a practice room and be like, I want to sound better, but we have to have some strategies for doing that. And I think these will help you. Remember, practice small chunks at a time. Trying to apply this for like 3 lines is not going to help you, because you'll remember all your mistakes, but not how to fix them. A couple more things I want to talk about. Let's add a little bit of musicality to this excerpt. There's not much written in here. It says forte. All right, but I think that we can look at some of the patterns that we see and think about ways to make it more interesting. When I see repeated notes, I want to do something with them. So at the opening, but still save a little room to grow. Maybe each of the time we have these 5 repeated notes, we can crescendo a little bit, and at the end of that phrase, I back off just a little bit. I'm still kind of forte, but I've made a shape, and we do that again. Right, so still forte with a little shape. That one was maybe more than the first measure. You can decide that, and then, right, a little shape. A little shape, but that one's a little lower, so maybe it's a little tiny bit softer. Forte, but less forte. And that gives us room to get maybe a little bit less, and then crescendo to the end. You don't have to do these dynamics exactly, but if you want a good score on your musicality, we have to show that we know how to shape these patterns so that they sound a little more interesting. Good. That is basically the end of my helpful ideas for you. I hope they've been helpful. I hope this is going to help your mid-state preparation. And if you have any questions about what I've just talked about, please feel free to email me at andrea.dawson@mtsu.edu. And happy practicing. I wish you all the best. Thank you.